You want me to get it?
All right. All right, so again, today's today's training is over standard-based instruction, and we're going to review what that is, and then help guide administrators on how to be able to view it in classrooms, and then how we can best help instruct teachers on what this is and what we should be looking for to have standard-based instruction within our classrooms. Can everybody see the screen? Thumbs up.
I've got it. We're good.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So just who we are. And so some of our teammates are here today. They're here actually learning with you. So you can see who your teaching and learning team is. Today, doing and presenting this is we do have our director, Dave Brainkamp, myself, I am Janie Lorney. And then we also have Mark, who is over ELA, and then Mary is supporting Mark with some of the features that we're going to be doing today, and she's over fine arts. You kind of just see the breakdown of who is who and kind of what areas of expertise that we do have. Next, for some reason, my enter doesn't like to work. Introduce who you are. So if you want to just kind of state who you are, what your name is. Robert, you've been here before, so welcome back. And I think I saw, Devlin, who's here. So just going to state who you are, your district and school and role, and I tend to answer these questions. And so I'm actually going to have my team as well who are here. We do have some team members here that are here to kind of be a part of this discussion and listen and learn as well. Kind of state who you are, right, what you do, and then why is standard-based instruction critical for student learning? Answer that question. And then what do you hope to gain from this session? So I'm going to give you just a moment to think about that, and I'm going to put my director on the spot. He doesn't know this is happening. But Dave, just as we give them time to think, why is standard-based instruction critical for student learning? So in your view, why is it important?
So hi, everybody. Welcome back. Glad to see our team, my team here, and some of our other guests out here. So that's awesome. So for me, instruction or standards-based instruction is so critical for that student because it should be about the student, and we need their involvement. We need them to not only be a buy-in, but they understand how important what learning is occurring and where they play a role and where they need to interject with us as teachers and say, I'm just not getting it. I need to hear it differently. What does it mean when you tell me I get a score of like a 3 or a 2? I want us to do better. So there's full buy-in on that, and that they understand that we're learning together, just like all of us are here tonight. So for me, that SOL standards is the standards for us is like the main piece. But then what does that mean when I go out to instruct it with best practices? So do you want me to popcorn it around, make somebody else on our team go?
Yeah, Dave, you can pick. So if you want to have somebody else on our team or our fine administrators, and we'll just get kind of everybody's thoughts.
Well, since they have an idea how at least 4 of us are, I'm going to jump down to Dr. Heather Crawford Ferry, and she can tell us about her idea of standards-based instruction and then what she does, because she's part of our great team. So thanks, Heather.
Hi, I'm Dr. Heather Crawford Ferry. I'm with the Meta Department of Education, and I oversee K-5 math. I'm inclined to take it from a K-5 math lens. So standards-based instruction is critical for student learning, I think particularly around trajectories of learning, to ensure that the math content and the instructional, both pedagogical and content knowledge combined, have a nice build for students that are logical and allow them to see the connections within mathematics, and allow students to continue to see that even if they attend different classrooms, different schools, different school districts within our state, that we know what second grade learning looks like, and that when we differentiate to meet student needs, we think about it from intensifying learning rather than leaving our standards. What do I hope to gain from this session? I'm sure I will learn to think outside of my initial math lens by being here with my colleagues who do not solely want to answer that question about mathematics, although I firmly believe it's the best place to be.
Heather, who you want to toss it off to?
I have Mary on my screen, so I'll throw it to Mary.
Why did I know that was going to happen? So thank you. So Mary Holzclaw, Office of Standards and Instructional Support with my good old friends here. Thank you, Dr. Heather Crawford Ferry, for that. I oversee K-12 fine arts and projects around competency-based learning. So I view standards-based instruction critical to students' learning as it kind of pertains to competency-based learning in the sense that, as Dr. Crawford Ferry mentioned, of having some continuity. Let's say a student moves from one district to another, there's at least some continuity between their grade 5 social studies class, or maybe when they're in fine arts and their dance courses and things of that nature. There is some similarities, maybe some slight differences, and it also just provides a very good basis for just instructional practices and things of that nature. What I hope to gain, I actually have already gained something by learning more from my colleagues, and I hope to gain and learn more from our administrators in attendance and hearing more beyond the K-5 math lens, though I do see the connection with my fine arts group. And with that, I'm going to popcorn it over to Robert.
And I muted myself. Hey, Bob Chambers, Carson City School District. I'm the principal at Carson High School. I'd go with why standards-based instruction is important, whether it's through the math lens or ELA or fine arts, just so you get your vertical and horizontal alignment all pointed in the same direction. It's like we're a small district, so it's nice to be able to look at what happens 6th, 7th, 8th grade and know that we're preparing them for 9th, 10th, et cetera, across the board. And then also horizontally, maybe not so much in Carson City, but we do get movement between Carson and Reno and Douglas, et cetera, that you have that horizontal alignment. So if they're going from English 2, they're not stepping into a completely different world if they go to Washoe County or Lyon County or Douglas County, that they all have a pretty good shot at receiving a high quality education. And like anything, I know a lot about a lot of different stuff, but whenever I do trainings, I always pick up something that I hadn't thought about before, or I missed, or just a little something that you can take home. And that's typically what I'm looking to do. And I will popcorn to Devin.
All right, thanks. Devin McNamee Horst, Clark County West Career and Tech Academy assistant principal there. So why is it critical? Because I feel as though if all the teachers are kind of teaching to that standards base, then no matter what classroom they're in, the kids are kind of getting hopefully the same quality education, kind of what Robert touched upon. So just making sure that if kids in classroom A, they're getting the same stuff as classroom B, and therefore also kind of moving them along, getting those skills that they need for the next class. And then what do I hope to gain? Some of our teachers at our school are kind of struggling with this standards-based instruction and kind of aligning things to standards. So I'm just hoping to gain ways to hopefully support them. So, and then I'll popcorn it to Heather. I don't know if she went yet. I don't think she did.
That was me, but I can pass it.
Oh, sorry.
I'll send it to Mark.
Thanks, Heather. My name is Mark Rincon, and I work here at the Nevada Department of Education. I'm the education programs professional for ELA K-12. And my view of standards-based instruction is really it's focused on standard-centered, student-centered form of pedagogy and instructional design. And I also think it's it really helps educators have that ongoing teaching cycle when it comes to learning. And it also ensures that all students have an opportunity to maximize their learning. And like others have also mentioned, really ensuring that everyone has access to a high quality education within our state. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Mark. Mike Mosqueda here. I am the 7 to 12 math at the Office of Standards and Instructional Support. Why is standard-based instruction critical for student learning? I guess I'm gonna borrow Robert's answer, and that's a vertical and horizontal alignment. And I'm also gonna borrow Mark's answer that access to it should be a student-centered, and having standard-based instruction maximize the potential of the student. And I hope to gain other insights from the participants here and the things that I haven't thought about. And that's what I hope to gain from this session. Thank you. I'm gonna popcorn it to Janie. To Janie.
Janie, can you hear us?
Sorry, yeah, I have so many windows open, it covered my bar, so I had to move windows to get my bar, apologies. So thank you. So yeah, so standard-based instruction is critical. When I think of standard-based instruction, I really think of very much alignment. That really comes into my mind when I'm thinking of what that instruction looks like. Really focused on what is that standard, what are the kids doing, and then how do I know that they're learning, and then how do I know that they've mastered it. And so that's kind of the some ideas that we're going to kind of go through in the next essentially 90 minutes with you is review some of these things, and we're going to pose a couple different questions for you to think about. So when you are talking with your teachers, even if you're walking through classrooms, but even if you're in meetings with teachers or you're in grade level meetings or PLCs with them, this is something that you can use, and you can ask these 4 questions so your teachers can start actually reviewing and reflecting on their lessons and ensuring that when they're designing learning that it is based off of standard-based instruction. We will be adding some additional sessions to our admin trainings that will actually go from standard-based instruction, and we will then move on to standard-based grade assessment and standard-based grading as well. So there we will be adding some continuation of this learning so that as schools and districts are incorporating standard-based instruction, assessment, and grading into their practices, that we do have some training and support for all of our districts. Just kind of moving forward, when we think about what we're going to be doing today is kind of what I just kind of said. We're going to go over our same old bits and pieces, our standard review that we do just for some information. And then we're going to go through the cycle of learning and then kind of ask some questions about standard-based instruction. How do we teach effectively? How do we know they're reaching mastery? How do we know they know what they're going to be able to do? And then we're going to practice. We're going to actually do some practice time with you. And so we're actually going to see classroom in action and see if we can come up with some good questions and answers. And if this was our teacher that we wanted to have a discussion on standard-based instruction, what would it look like? So again, this is part of our admin series. It does go through June. We will be not changing some sessions, but adding some sessions throughout additional into next year as well as the next summer. If we get some continued feedback, we will probably continue to continue this for our administrators. We do feel really passionate and very strong that our administrators need dedicated professional learning. It needs to be ongoing. So just because you're an administrator doesn't mean you're all knowing and that your learning stops, right? We are lifelong learners. And so we want to ensure that we can help you with that and make those better decisions too. Again, for participants, you earn hours after each session. You will receive a certificate. And if you did sign up for SUU credit, you know who you are and you could have done that as well. Our calendar, you can use the link and or the QR code, and all of these trainings are on the professional learning calendar. I will tell you that our office, all of the agency, actually all of NDE is starting to remember that calendar is there, and they're including more of their training. So please go back to that frequently to see if there's any updated trainings. And again, this is also to help encourage and build our professional learning network. And so we do want to help you, right? Help each other, because our work is really hard. It's very difficult. And so we want to help make the work. We need to work smarter, not harder, right? And so, because you can only be in one place. So when we think about standards, right? Standards, they're the destination. Instruction is the journey. And so I did like this. I found this in an article and I thought this was pretty relevant for today, because right? Standards gives us that first location. We know that's where we need to go, but how do we ensure that our students are getting there? How do we ensure that they're going to master those standards? So when we look at actual standards, right? When I think about what a standard is, we want to break it down into different elements, right? We want to understand what the standard is. We want to make sure that there's alignment in what we're teaching across the board with all of our standards, right? We want to make sure that right? That how piece is really important when it comes to teaching. How are they actually teaching the standard? Then we want to make sure we have evidence of learning. So what are those assessments in place to make sure that we know that what we need our students to learn, they are actually learning. And then probably the most important aspect that we have a tendency to forget as educators is feedback. We need to ensure that our students are receiving timely, immediate feedback on their learning so that they know where they're at, and then you know, or the teacher does know, right, where they need to be going. So here we're going to, do we have the video here, Mark? Just a high overview of standard-based instruction.
It is actually further down.
It's
not
further
yet,
down?
but yes.
Well, then I take that back. So we have a little video for you for high level, and Mark will be playing that for you. So when we think about the 4 levels of the cycle of learning, we broke it down into essentially four questions that we're going to be getting to. And in this cycle of learning, and you can kind of see like my idea of what a cycle was, because I did create this little chart, but that it is ongoing. It's an ongoing teaching and learning cycle that occurs in a classroom between the teacher and all of the students. And if you do look in this cycle, you'll see that there's that standard up front, right? The standard is that driving force. But then you see we're going to practice it. You have to assess that practice. Then you practice it again, and then you assess that practice, right? We need to see where our students are at, and we need to be able to assess these in using formative assessments in a pretty consistent, constant way, so we can actually see growth in our students. Not only do us as educators need to see growth in our students, but our students need to see growth in themselves. And here's a great idea where we start to teach our kids on how to actually identify even gaps or growth, and then have them be able to interpret what that looks like and what that means, and then what they need to do to help master that standard. The teacher's role then is to help facilitate that, right? How do they actually help facilitate that learning growth within those students? Formative assessments are going to be key, right, in reaching mastery. If formative assessments are not occurring on a daily basis, students nor the teachers have absolutely no idea, right, where they're at, what they're doing, how they're learning, and if they need to progress more or not, right? Like, so if you were to say, do you know what you're doing? Have you mastered this? A student may be like, I have no idea. And a student can't say, oh, well, I did worksheet 1.2. I don't know what worksheet 1.2 means, right? A parent doesn't know that. You don't know that. And so we need to ensure that our students have a full understanding of everything that they are learning, from the purpose to the assessment, right, to the why, so that they can continue that process. The questions. So here I'm going to kick it off to Mr. Brandkamp, and he is going to review, and then we're going to go into depth with these 4 critical questions that go through that cycle of learning.
Thank you, Janie. And while we're doing that, would you mind moving Mark over as co-host? He's going to need that for the videos, I believe. So,
yeah.
Thanks. All right, gang, these are our foundation, right? And you've heard Janie kind of almost express them, but, we'll get them, she was using her words, but that sense of, and I think we've all heard that beginning one, right? Of what do students need to know, understand, and be able to do. That driving piece of why we're in our business anyway, right? Is what is it that we want them to walk away with? And I think that's that important side. When we look at our standards, is it often tell us, what we're going to do, but then how we're going to get there. That's the other piece of that instruction we got to work on. And then how do we teach effectively to ensure that all our students are learning, right? Real important that they all can touch in, they all have the basis to get in, they can, what's the most effective way? We're going to take a look at a couple of those, some samples I believe coming up here in a second that Mark's going to share with us. And then Janie hit on that real important piece of how do we know the students are learning, right? That formative piece we've all had, and I know it's easy from our office, especially at the department, to think, oh yeah, well, we have that summative. But that's that end, right? And it's so hard after sometimes a summative to even make those changes, or if we've moved on, or it takes so long to get results back, as we all know. So what we want is that immediate piece of, am I doing this well? Do I need help? Where do I need help? Just as Janie said, that feedback, it's beyond just saying good job. Good job what? Tying my shoes, picking out my outfit, whatever. We need that. What is it that I'm doing well? Where could I still have that help with, right? That's what all of us do when we come back from something and ask, well, what else could we do? We ask you that almost every time when we finish these sets. What else could we help you with? And what else worked well? What else would you ask us to change? And then that piece, what do we do when students are not learning or are reaching that mastery? And it's not always that, oh, let's just pull out some new program or something else. It might be that you have to teach it a little differently, that tier one piece, that piece of saying, well, I don't, and we all heard the joke, let me just say it louder, or let me say it slower. No, we got to do something different, because what you said the first time isn't resonating with me. I got to hear it in maybe a different way, see it in a different way, work with it in a different way. And those are those critical questions. So Mark, I believe when we do the next video, maybe let's bounce back, see where do we see these. So Mark, turn it back to you, since you're a master of the video.
All right, thank you, Dave. So first off, we're going to look at a video that is really capturing standards-based instruction, high-level overview in a English language arts classroom. And my apologies really quick.
To shift your perspective and to see that standards can be this equalizing force to say, by the end of a student's educational career, they will be able to do X, Y, and Z is transformative.
And that's all students. So students with disabilities, multilingual students, students struggling for various reasons, students in every district in the state, no matter their income level.
Our students deserve and are entitled to the right to equity in education with the rigor that comes with it, irrespective of the district or the school.
When I'm teaching ELL, the standards for all the subject areas are really part of my planning and thinking and goal setting. As an ELL teacher, I'm able to help them access the curriculum and achieve these standards, first of all, just by believing that they can.
Students really need access to cognitively demanding and linguistically demanding text every single day of their schooling.
It's really critical that you match students with materials that are on their independent as well as their instructional reading levels. And by doing that, you give them opportunities to read independently, to build that confidence and fluency.
When kids are really engaged with a text, not just reading it, that's why I like this verb engage. When they're really engaged with a text, it's awesome to see, it's magical.
The student is making personal connections. The student is making text-to-text connections. The student is showing empathy in what they're reading, recognizing conflict, using evidence from the text.
So reading is always at the center of English language arts, but we do want to make the point that texts come in various forms. They can involve videos, they can be multimedia, and students engage with those texts at a grade appropriate level, as well as with words on a page.
Engagement within literacy is so important, and what that looks like are 4 tenets of literacy: reading, writing, speaking, and listening.
It all really works together to build strong literacy.
My big hope for my students and for all of our students is that they'll be able to use these skills that they've learned that are based on these really strong standards to go out into the world and change it.
A classroom that is aligned to these ELA standards is a classroom where students are making connections between the different things that they're reading, between their own lives. And I think it's a classroom where light bulbs go off.
And I think that it's just so important that we are raising the next generation of future leaders and learners and critical thinkers. And I think the standards do support that.
So hopefully that video gave you just a high-level overview of what some educators were sharing, how they shared their thoughts when it came to standard-based instruction. And, when we're thinking about some of those practices that the educator shared in the video, it's mainly, engaging in guided practice, having students participate in discussions, asking clarifying questions, engaging in different note-taking strategies when it comes to instruction. These are all things that we would like to see when we're working with our students. There is another video I'd like to show you of how we can see standards-based instruction with a math lens. So.
Do you want me to show it? Do you got it? Okay.
Students in mathematics should engage with meaningful, real-world problems every single day.
Teaching math as real-world problems, not just as numbers, it sets them up to look at a problem that they're facing and have skills, have a toolbox of strategies they've used to solve something before.
The way that they learn best is if they're really actively sort of involved in the learning process and really seeing how it applies to their own lives. And our new standards are really designed to make sure that students are grappling with real stuff.
I need to have the carpeting fit the room. I need to figure out the tip for my restaurant bill. For children, they need to understand that math is really a part of real-world life and is a way that we solve problems as children and, of course, as adults, too.
Once you learn the things that they value and the things that they do every day and become a part of their world that way, you're able to develop real-world problems that relate, that are relevant to their everyday life.
If I come up with this great problem, but the students have no idea the background of the problem, that real-world problem will actually get in the way of them understanding the mathematics.
Part of learning is around being able to take academic risk. If we stay safe, we don't learn as much. You have to be able to go beyond to be able to look at that next step, which is really about confidence.
The kids need the academic skills that we teach through the standards, but they also need the soft people skills that just make you a nice whole person and can really interact well with other people and have meaningful relationships in your life.
When you invest in students' social emotional learning, you invest in them as learners for life.
Social emotional learning is actually one of the key parts of what educators need to attend to in order to actually teach math, science, or English.
My goal for students in the classroom is for them to be able to think for themselves and make decisions on their own and feel confident about it.
I hope that these new standards help to raise the bar for our students, that students will be even better prepared for the rest of their life, and to make sure that when they graduate from our wonderful public high schools, that they are ready for whatever the next step is right for them.
A classroom that is aligned to these standards is a classroom that is in a position to better prepare their students for the goal for that grade level.
A classroom that is aligned to these standards is a classroom that's teaching students how to persevere.
So as you can see in this last video that we just watched, it's really going beyond that next step, as you heard in the video, and having students go into problem solving and comprehension strategies on different content areas. It's also asking those challenging questions when it comes to instructional practices. So these are, different strategies that we want to observe when we're thinking about standards-based instruction. So I'll turn it over back to Dave.
Thank you, Mark. That was fun to see. Sorry, little interruptions, right? We love it. We love those little sets. So we get to do those immediate feedback of helping my mother-in-law even with cooking, right? She couldn't open a container. So how do we figure those? So thanks, everybody. Mark, I believe we're with you, and Mary are going to help us with a Jambox, I believe, that you're going to set up, or some Padlet, I believe, one of those, about what should students know and be able to do. So do you want to frame that question for our group? Because we've gained some other players with Nicole and Tammy on board. I'm glad you joined us.
Yeah, sure. So we have a Padlet set up for you, and it's pretty much coming around. So thinking about standards-based instruction, one of those questions is what should students know and be able to do? So what we have is we have this Padlet. Thank you, Mark, for the link. And it's basically provide your thoughts surrounding the idea of standards-based instruction of what should students know and be able to do. Okay, so we'll give a couple minutes for that, and these could just be off-the-cuff ideas. It could be like general skills, things of that nature. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your screen. And in the Padlet, if you've not been able to use it before, you're going to add your note by using the plus sign in the bottom right-hand corner, right? Making sure Mark's got me on that one. And just take 2 or 3 minutes. These don't have to be long thoughts, just kind of get us started of what should students be able to know and what should they be able to do. This could be at any grade level, just in general. And you can take some of the ideas that we even saw in the video. And my office mates, please feel free to chime in with your thoughts as well.
As we're writing, a big thing for me when I think about what students should be able to know and be able to do is when we think about the standards as a whole, and we actually unpack standards because we want to actually understand the actual standard itself. And then a big piece of unpacking that I think is forgotten about, that I know Dave always likes to chat about, is you have to actually then repack it, right? Once you take it apart and you want to know what you need to do, you have to actually put it back together, and educators need to actually put it back together to figure out how to actually teach that. So we should know, right, by the end, to master that standard, this is what students should be able to do. And that is just something that I think helps break it down as far as understanding what that standard means and then how to get there.
Agreed, Janie. Sorry, I had my non-office helpers causing a ruckus behind me. So we've got know what the standards they are working towards when they have mastered it, engage in guided practices, analyze and synthesize what they're reading, materials, apply knowledge to real world applications, connect their learning across the other subjects. Yes. Persevere in problem solving, ask thought-provoking and clarifying questions. Should be able to know how to ask questions about what they're learning to make connections. Yes. It goes back to our first introductory question. Like what we understand and hope to gain from this session. Be able to know what is expected of them to do it, explain how, why they did it, etc. You're awesome. Okay, so from here, we'll keep the Padlet for record, and I think that will also be in our notes, right, Janie?
Yes.
Perfect. I will pass it back to Janie.
No problem, Mary. I've got it for here. If we can go to our next slide about that, let's just take a minute of what we see, right? What should they do, right? Some of these you saw up there, their grade level expectations being articulated and aligned. I believe, Bob, you talked about that, how important, a couple of us, about vertical and horizontal alignment. Do they know the sequence or scope that it's going in? And this is not your pacing guide. This is just, I still remember my son coming home and saying, I think the teacher's mad because they suddenly went to geometry. He saw no connection to what had just occurred in the classroom. And it's sometimes, it helps our kids to kind of know, oh, okay, this is building, this is where it's going, this might be, or maybe it's a puzzle. And but I can see where this puzzle is starting to fit in. So they know what's available, as well as, what is that I need to, you keep talking about mastery. So what is it that I have to be able to see? Is it, what's the work going to look like? What are you asking me to do? Do I understand? Can I ask you questions? When you tell me I have to be able to do X, as I think in the video Mark showed, X, Y, and Z, do I even know what that is, right? And then vital is, am I using the material around me that is standard-based curriculum and aligned to what's there? Or is it still, and I think we've all heard that, my favorite butterfly unit or my favorite set, even though it has nothing to do with my standards, right? Those throw not only the students off, but they can throw all of us off as to why are we doing this? I don't see where it's connected. And a big piece is we're all making this shift and doing this is, are we involving our parents so that they understand as a family and their members out there, when they go home and talk about school, or you have something, do the parents understand why we're making these expectations on our kids and having them be involved? Otherwise, a lot of us, we're the results of being successful in a school system because we figured out that game, but the game's changing and we need to have them understand. So this is why, because our world has changed and we need them to be, as you saw in those, our future leaders. So much of what we're preparing for, folks, these kids have no idea. We have no idea what might be in front, that we need them to be these amazing leaders for all of us to be successful as well. So do we share that with our families so they understand? Right. Really.
Something else too, Dave, I want to really focus on, in that it's not just about being standard based, but if you notice in a couple of these bullet points, you see grade level. It's really critical and imperative, right? As we're teaching and learning, and as we're building teachers' toolkits, is that, right? Teachers come in, we pre-assess our students absolutely when we come in, and then they'll immediately say, oh, they're not at grade level. And so they want to immediately go to their instructional level, or teach 3 grade levels below, or teach the standards, right, from 2 grades ago. We cannot do that. We have to maintain at grade level. So students, even if they're not there, we have to maintain at grade level. We have to scaffold and we have to provide support, but we still have to maintain the standard and teaching the standard at that grade level. And that's something that is really difficult, and it's really easy to slide back in and say, but my kids don't get it, right? They can't read. How am I going to do it? Well, and then that's our job as educators, right? We have to build those scaffolds in order to help them achieve what they need to achieve at that grade level. And that's why it's so important to really communicate that with our families as to what they're learning and why they're learning it. And the expectation is that they will master this at the end. Some might need more support than others. Some may not get there. However, some may grow, right? If you teach 5th grade and they're at 2nd grade and they get to 4th grade, wow, what a great year that was. That is a lot of growth. That tells me, right, that student will continue to grow. And so we really need to emphasize, right, that we still want to maintain teaching at grade level. We know through research that teaching at grade level really does help our students achieve at that level at a much faster rate than if we always maintain at the instructional level. If we do that, and I'm going to speak to math, the little bit of math that I know, but if we're always stuck in the 3rd grade standards, we're never going to get to where those kids need to go, because math is vertically aligned and those standards are built upon each other. And if we stay there, we just hover around that, by the time they get to algebra, whew, life is hard. And so we really need to focus on that. And that's a really hard discussion to have with your educators, is how do we do that? How do we ensure that we're teaching at grade level? And those are just those scaffolds that we really need to work on. And sometimes we think we do it, or we think the kids can or cannot do it. And sometimes it does just come down to explicit teaching. But when we're using those materials, we need to ensure that they are grade level and addressing the standards. So I see Tammy, those are obstacles that they're addressing on it. They are. I think that that's something that many administrators across the country deal with on a daily basis. But we need to do justice and do right by our kids with that.
Thank you, Janie. I believe, and you probably could figure out after we see the next slide up, we're going to be taking each one of these questions, and Mark and Mary are going to guide us once again in a Padlet to get some ideas around this teaching effective to ensure. You might be thinking about like those feedbacks, multiple opportunities, what else is out there? What do we know ahead of time? I think from the video it talked about that we're aware, and the planning. So Mark, Mary, I'll turn it back to you for a sec.
Well, thank you, Dave. You kind of kicked it off perfectly, because basically I was going to say, in the sense of your role as an administrator and knowing your school site and just reflecting, is the teaching effective to ensure student learning, and reflecting on the videos and things of that nature, or what can we do to improve it? Or what are some things that we can think about, or strategies? You've heard terms like formative assessment to get real life input instead of waiting for that summative assessment. Things of that nature, or what are some things that maybe could be seen in the classrooms, or maybe how you can help. I think there was a mention, because this is hard work to do, just to try to make sure, like Janie mentioned, there are sometimes we have our favorite units that we love to teach, but they're not standards based. They're just our favorite thing to do. And when you have a kiddo that goes from maybe your classroom to a different classroom, they're not on par, right? So we've got writing across the content areas, okay? Planning, yes. We've talked about some scaffolding a little bit, bringing them back up to that grade level. I go with formative assessment a lot because I like the real life data check of, well, maybe I'm missing this, but how do I ensure, maybe I taught it this way and it worked for one class, but maybe not this other class. So how can I improve? Classroom culture, models, practices, and procedures.
What do you think about? What are you going to see? What are you going to see teachers doing in the classroom, right? During learning, no matter if it's a flipped classroom, what type of learning is happening, what are we going to see? What are we actually going to see? What do we see the kids doing? What do we see the teacher doing? What I hope I don't see is the teacher sitting at their desk with their feet on the desk, reading newspaper, which I have seen many times before. So that's not what I would say effective to student learning. But what do we see?
I like this discourse. There could be like just group discussion. Maybe they're formatively checking each other. I've seen that when I was in the classroom. We had small group discussions. We have shoulder partners, things of that nature.
I'm going to ask the person who wrote planning. Expand.
Janie, that was me just trying to get them out and start. So,
but why, Dave? What does that mean?
So to me, so much of what I'm very fortunate to teach a course with Dr. Crawford Ferry with our math folks is they don't realize how important it is to be thinking ahead of questions students may ask. What do I want them to do? So you don't just show up and go, oh, here's your book and let's start with page 1 and read. You've got to be thinking, where do I want them to go? What questions might ask? What task might I put in front of them that could give them a sense of where this lesson may go? And then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this went south. Where am I going to go? What would I do different? Or wow, they're just blowing through this. Where am I going to go next? So that they're not caught going, all right, good job, guys. Now you have time to do your homework because I have no idea what I'm doing next. Is not that sense. They've got to be thinking in all different areas of both up, down, sideways, whichever way this lesson may go. Because we all know our kids will come up with these answers we haven't even thought of. So that's what I was thinking, Janie.
Yeah, it's important.
We didn't have anybody out there, so I was trying to help Mary and Mark get some stuff up on the board. And
well, that's okay. I'm going to read out what Heather put: anticipatory planning. And actually, Dave, what you were describing is what
Yep.
Heather mentioned and what I had done of like thinking fully rounded, well, maybe my class, we're at this point. So planning ahead, well, maybe we get it, we're great, and we're on par with standards and grade based and where we need to be. And how can we dive deeper?
But I think it also helps if you plan well, so you're not up there doing all that talking like we are right now. We're getting you
Exactly.
guys involved so that they can be part of this, so.
I think there was also some critical ones with risk taking, collaboration, and then student centered instruction. Right, we know these are positive things. We know these are things in the classroom, but we do need to make sure we remind, right, our school staff that these are really critical learning pieces that need to happen every day in our classroom.
Agreed.
Think we got him?
Yeah.
All right.
So back to you, Dave.
We can get our next set up there. I think Janie has it coming out behind it. All right, see how we did. Let's take a look. So standards where they taught to mastery, right? Planning through teacher collaboration. I think that's a huge one. We were all building off of each other's ideas on that one. That's an important piece. Do you go and talk to your neighbor? Do you talk to each other? Do you say, oh my gosh, my kids are just struggling since we've been beating up on our math world? You know, I don't know how to help them with decimals. Well, maybe Mike is a guru in decimals. So Mike, give me some hints. What do your kids are sailing with that? So, you know, I think that's an important piece to get. And then I want to say, what is about the fifth one down? That students engaged in that learning. You know, is it really the learning and they're not in there? And I'm just going to pick on because Mark's up in my corner. Mark's has this thing going, but I walk over and they're all talking about the basketball game from last night instead of Mark's lesson. It can look like they're engaged, right? But they're not in on it. So are they really getting, are they asking? You might have to ask them the questions, right? Get them thinking like we were doing with our whole team here. And that feedback, I know we keep harping on it, but it's so important that they know, yes, I'm on the right track. Or you can ask them sometimes, well, where are you going with this? Because they could be on a track we hadn't even thought of, that if they're on for a while, leads you a whole new pathway that we hadn't even thought of. So it's nice to say, you know, it doesn't always have to be because, you know, we've been picking on the math. No, that's not the right answer. It might be, no, tell me why you think that. I want to know where you're going with this. Because maybe there's a piece I missed in the direction or I missed in the task. And I think that's that important piece, that those multiple opportunities to figure this out. It's not just one way. So I had some great ideas there. Anything else from my colleagues you want to add before we jump to the next couple here? Okay, that's enough wait time. Janie, next slide, please, if you don't mind. So we hit on how important that engagement was, right? Focus on the teacher or an activity, not staring out the window, looking at something that they shouldn't, or not paying attention. You know, are they actively involved, right? We can all know, we've all probably seen it where, and you might guess it might be some of these folks that are on our call. Oh, I'll just wait, Dave will eventually answer it, right? No, let's see, what else? Mark, I haven't heard from you. Mark, where you at? I know you're thinking something there. I can hear those wheels cranking through. What's going on with the activity or whatever that assignment might be, so that we know there's some great ideas. Some of the things I remember from just walking in was to an unknown person's classroom in a school was this student with special needs. Actually, I didn't realize called on, and you could hear the room like, oh my gosh, you called on him first. Amazing what this child brought to the room. It was amazing. We don't know what our kids might be thinking, and sometimes you have to bring that out. So real important that they're there and they feel part of that discussion. Next one, Janie. All right, can they tell us what you're doing? Right? It's always interesting when you walk in and you're talking with kids and finding out what's going on. Do they know why we're doing what's happening? Maybe it's exploratory, so they can just tell you, I'm not sure, but he's having us do something to figure out later. But they're engaged, they're playing with it, they're having fun with it, versus the one that goes, I don't know, he's been up there talking for 20 minutes. I have no idea what Mr. Brandkamp wants. You know, where are we going with it? They should be able to tell you, I'm trying to get from point A to B, and I know what B needs that mastery. What does it look like? Sound like? Whatever you're asking them to do, I know what I'm trying as my goal or objective to get there. And a neat piece when that says they receive and act on that descriptive feedback. One of the most entertaining thing I remember was watching teachers hand out a test and there were no scores on them, but lots of comments. And the kids were like, what do I do? I'm like, well, instead of just throwing it away because you think you're done, I want you to look it through and think, based on what you're reading, how do you think you did? What are you going to ask me? And really got them thinking about, oh, so you kind of need me to do something, and I want you to change either your thoughts to this, share your thoughts, whatever it might be, so that they know, oh, good, I didn't check the box and I'm never coming back. We need to be able to ask them, where am I going to use this? What's going on? So that that feedback sinks in and they can keep learning, right? We're all learning from each other. I've learned some great things from each other already. So other closing thoughts on this piece before I think our next Padlet is about up. Oh, thank you, Janie. See, I have my Padlet still open. I blanked out my other ones, right? I'm going to jump down to that one to collaborate and use strategies about learning. How often are we doing that where we're asking our kids, where are you? And what else do they need, right? We do that with you at the end. Sometimes to see, that's like Janie suggested, and we've made a change just about doing this standards-based learning as an intro tonight. We'll get into the grading and assessments down the road. So that's going to make us set. So it's asking you, where do I need to go? And what am I going to do to change this learning process, or what I need to do to make things better as I'm going through this whole learning journey, as Janie, I think, used in your opening slide. It is a journey. So we have to figure out who do I ask? Where do I go? What can I do to help on the way? And where can I get that assistance if needed? Yeah.
And just to continue, this is when you see student engagement really as a learner, not just in learning, is where you really start to see student agency, right? You're going to start to see the students really own their own learning. They want to help. They want to help dictate what their learning is going to end up as. They really help self-direct their own goals. This is where you're going to start to see a lot of metacognition, right? So if we think of NEPF, right, when we think of standard 4 and standard 5, this is where we're going to really start to see this and see this reflection. This is hard for teachers to sometimes separate the control piece for them and let it go for their students. But as a learner, so if a student really is advocating for their learning, you're going to start to see them grow as a learner, not just what was in learning. So we wanted to differentiate, right, the different types of student engagement. So as students are growing and as students are mastering and they're showing competency in what those standards are, we're going to start to evolve and have the learner be more of a leader in what that agency looks like. And so that's hopefully kind of what you start to see throughout the year, right? That they're involved in the classroom, then they're just involved in what's happening in the classroom. And now they're actually leading that work as a learner in the classroom. So just kind of wanted to review that, because these pieces are really critical for us to really be able to see if students are starting to learn, and then how we're going to start to know if they're learning.
And Janie, you set us up for the next Padlet as well. It's coming in there. Mark, and then Mark and Mary, you're going to take us through that. And Mark, I believe you got those coming through. Is how do we know what they're learning?
Dave. So yes, we dropped the link in the chat to our next question, and is, like Dave mentioned, how do you know students are learning? Please use the Padlet to just describe your thoughts on how you would think students are learning. So let's just take a few minutes to think about this. Colleagues that are on the call with me, please feel free to participate in the Padlet as well. So as the Padlet is being populated right now, we have assessments, metacognitive activities, discussion with students, great one. Students can demonstrate by communicating and applying what they have learned. Nice. Students are able to explain their point along the standards journey. This could be done orally, written, or project-based. Listening to their discourse responses. That's a really great example. They are utilizing the skills and the content to create. Nice. Using data from formative assessments, prompts, virtual responses, etc. Observations. Again, we have someone also added formative assessments, communicating. This one's really powerful. Purposeful observation. Know in advance what you're looking for. Yes. And again, another person added observing their work and asking those questions. These are some really great examples of how you know that your students are learning. Observing rubrics. Another great idea is that you can conference with your students and have them provide feedback. That's another great example. Developing surveys for your students to complete. That's another great example to engage with your students to know how they are learning. So, well, thank you everybody for participating in our third question for this evening. And I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to go to our next slide. So let's see how we did, So this slide, we're going to really examine, to see if we hit some of the targets. When we're thinking about how our students are learning, we want to look at assessments that are aligned to our standards, summative and formative assessments to understand and make sure that they're utilized correctly. Thinking of how we can always have that continuous measurement of learning, always assessing and knowing where our students are at. Learning that's demonstrated through performance assessments, regular feedback and guidance with our students. Again, it's looking through discourse and observing their work. Instruction is personalized and guided by the individual student data. That one's really powerful. And the last two is standards-based grading and making decisions guided by always using, analysis of multiple sources of data. And, not just relying on that one key data piece, but looking at multiple sources of data to analyze and see how our students are actually performing when it comes to standards-based instruction. So let's go to our next slide, please.
Hold on, before we do that, Mark, I just want to ask our individuals today. So looking at, we've had kind of 3 questions to ask ourselves when we're actually reviewing for standards-based instruction. So what is something that you have noticed that has been consistent throughout the three questions and like the 3 best practices? So I'm going to invite you all turn your mics on, but what are words that you're seeing that are consistent so far that you've seen like on every single side? Anybody who wants to jump in. I was teaching for a real long time.
I'll do it.
I see. I'm really good at wait time. I was really good at that. I definitely scored high on those marks. All right, Tammy, what is something that you're seeing consistently?
And I always break on wait time. 100% of the time I crack.
Oh, you're one of those.
I'm one of those. I can't stand it. Like the pressure is just too much. So I think it's that on every one of them, it's very student focused. So it's about the participation, like the getting the students to participate in the classroom, the feedback and guidance to the students, the assessing the students, that it's not teacher centered, it's very student centered.
Mm-hmm.
And there's assessments, like we're really thinking about where constantly looking at the assessment, the data is constantly a thread through all the areas.
Great. Yes. Right. Feedback, guidance, student-centered assessments. Perfect. Yes. Anybody else have anything else that they're seeing consistently so far over these first 3 questions?
Sorry, I had to step out for a second.
That's all right. Did you get a snack at least?
I did.
All right, right on. That's what's important.
And some
Totally.
water.
100%.
No, I mean, just on, and I wasn't exactly sure what the first question was because I came in right at it. I mean, as I look at this slide, it just all circles back to the assessments and using those assessments to measure where your students are. And then so that you can make appropriate academic decisions for your students, like really on an individual basis or maybe small group basis, depending on the class.
Yeah, amen. Right. I want to add a word in there for you, Bob. I'm going to say add immediate, right? Like we want to have immediate assessments so we know where our students are at and we know what they're learning. And then if we need to either remediate or correct instruction, then we know how to do that, right? As if we wait weeks, days, months, I went out of order, but that's okay. We're not going to know, right, where our kids are at. And then we're not going to know like if a gap is occurring because we don't have that instantaneous data. And so those are things that are really key. I just wanted to bring like to our attention that when we're really focused on student-based instruction, standard-based instruction, we are focused on the student, right? That student who we are teaching. Right. And so we want to ensure that we have regular feedback, right? We're consistent with feedback. We're consistent with assessments. And I just wanted to really bring that to the forefront as you are seeing in the learning today, that this is something that you've seen on a continuous stream. So just really wanted to bring that and highlight that. So when you like take this back to your school and you internalize this and you process that, if you only take away those couple things, great, right? You are a step ahead. So fantastic. So thanks for that. Thanks for that little segue. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, Janie, can I share something really quick?
I would love for you. Hi, Jackie.
So, hi. So I was in Douglas County today and saw something really amazing. Sorry, Bob, but I happened to walk by a math classroom at Douglas High and a geometry class. And I know the teacher and several of the students in there. So the folks that I was with in Douglas County, we popped in because it was like, there was something amazing happening in there. And talked to the teacher, and these kids were taking their unit test. It was an honors geometry class. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so loud in here. Like, this is kind of amazing. And she lets her kids take their tests with partners. And so naturally I was like, really? Tell me about that. And she said, well, I hear more from these kids when they're talking about all the different theories and postulates that they're applying in their proofs when they're working with a partner on this test than I will ever see in the proofs that they do on paper. And I thought that was really insightful. And it actually made me think about this for tonight, because it really was about the students. It wasn't necessarily about what their final piece or final paper was that they're turning in, but she had a lot of anecdotal notes throughout the whole assessment process, just based on their conversations. And I thought it was really powerful. So that's all I wanted to share.
Thanks, Jackie. I think that really hits like that fourth bullet, right? That learning demonstrated through performance assessments. It's something to take to heart that assessments can and should look different in all classrooms. And even though we showed you videos today of math and ELA, standard-based instruction and standard-based grading and assessment should be occurring in all of our classrooms. Particularly, we have 9 queries that have standards, and so we should be seeing this in all. So I think that's a great, actual example of what this actually can and should look like. And it's a great anchor for us. So thank you for sharing. And it happened today. So how timely.
I would totally take geometry again if I was in that class.
Yeah, me too, because all I remember from geometry is writing pages of whatever I had to write, and I hated every minute of it. It was terrible.
Probably pages of proofs, Janie.
Yeah, not if, then, all that crap. No thanks. I'm out. I'm out. All right, Mike, let's go on, or Mark, let's go on to the last one.
All right, so let's look at our last question for this afternoon.
Oh my. I'm gonna stop sharing and fix this.
The recording is having its issues.
Yeah, my whole computer is having an issue, so hold on a second. All right, last question. Okay.
And that last question that we're looking at for this afternoon is, what do we do when students are not reaching mastery? If you can provide some examples of activities that you have utilized to help students, if you can share that within the Jamboard as well. All right, so let's look at some of our responses that we have so far. I really like small group instruction. This takes a good deal of planning on the teacher side, but it really pays the dividends. Differentiating groups, scaffolding, small group instruction on missed skills. Great. Reteach students in different content, contexts or tasks. Based on formative assessments, small group instruction to revisit the material. What should we do? Address the content from a different learning trajectory point. Some examples include struggles with, just looking at different ways how we can look at additive reasoning, but still stay on the standard. Reteach, try a different approach. Look at, again, someone mentioned again, looking at that data component of our formative assessments, identifies the next step for instruction and makes changes, small group differentiation. Check and see how many are not getting it, and maybe it might be an instruction problem. You know, that is really a great point to share. You know, as educators, we need to be really reflective on our practices and maybe make those adjustments when things are just not going quite well within our classroom. So
I'm gonna go off script again, because it's what I do best. And so let me ask the group here. If I walk into a classroom and I have noticed through just observations and looking at looking at scores, looking at some data results, and I'm seeing that the students really aren't mastering standards, are you going to advise to continue with different approaches in tier 1 instruction, or when do we start tier 2 intervention?
Can you ask that one more time? I think I missed a piece.
Sure. So I'll just clarify. So we're looking at data. We're definitely seeing that the standards in classes are not being met, and they can be any classroom at all. When do we stop, or do we ever stop tier 1 instruction to focus on tier 2 interventions? Just want to open up for some dialogue between tier 1 instruction and tier 2 instruction. because this is a key component in standard-based instruction.
So my observations are mainly in math, and math is super nice because it's linear for the most part. And I've been hammering on the small group instruction because it allows the teacher to look at where, after a formative assessment, where is everybody, where are my holes, and the students who can move forward. And that's where it's a lot of teacher planning, that you can plan for the other students who are ready to go, they can move forward. And then you can work with the students who aren't there yet in small group. And I've even seen it where it's a group of 6 students, and then it's reduced to a group of 3 students. You just keep working with those students at their level, and it takes time and planning, but that's how you move forward. And it works really well, but it's also a lot of teacher planning.
Yeah, it's a lot of front loading, right? Like that there has to be a lot of teacher prep and planning that goes into that, because that's really about bringing in personalized learning, right? And so that it sounds like these teachers that you're working with are really invoking that idea of what personalized learning looks like. But what I didn't hear you say though, Bob, and so correct me if I'm wrong, is that tier 1 instruction like never stopped, right?
No, so for the students who have it, that's like a lot, they're going to move on kind of independently because they can. Right. And then that's where the teacher has that ability to keep working at a different tier with the students, depending.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I will throw in, because I hate that wait time again.
I love it.
We look at the tier 1 instruction continues because we're elementary and kids have all year to master the standard, but we have blocks each day, an intervention block for tier 2 and tier 3. So it depends on how many kids are not getting it. So if kids are not getting the instruction, then we pause, we think about what we're doing as instructors. And then, and we also look at if it's small groups of kids, kind of like Bob was talking about, then we do pull those tier 1 differentiated instruction groups. And we look at what, teachers, our teachers are pretty good about walking around collecting formative data. What is the problem? If it's reading and we're looking at character traits, and how it drives the sequence of events, are they missing the character trait parts? Are they missing the sequence of events parts, or can they just not read? And so there's different problems. So I think you have to break it down like that. If it's my little kiddo that might be EL or SPED, I'm still giving them the tier 1 instruction, and I'm front loading and providing pieces to them through small groups, but I also am going to address them during that intervention block. If it's the kiddo that is having trouble with sequencing of events, that's a small group piece in tier 1. And if it's something like the character traits, I just can't identify character traits, then it's another small group that I'll pull over and work with on character traits. But the tier 1 continues. You're always looking at, and for us, we always look at the tier 1, and then the tier 2 is outside of that tier 1 block. And so that's extra pieces. We do extra time and extra pieces for those sets of kids, so that when they come back to the tier 1, the 120 minutes of tier 1, they have front loading and scaffold different supports for whatever their need might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great response, because things we want to ensure, like there's lots of ways, right, to ensure that tier 1 instruction is occurring. The one thing we have to ensure though is that tier 1 instruction is occurring for all of our students, right? We have to assess in tier 1, or then we don't know, right, where gaps are, and then we don't know how to support the students. So tier 1 is really important. In my experience in the educational landscape, as I have it right now, I would say sometimes we're way too quick to go to tier 2 interventions. And sometimes it's just a reassessment. And sometimes that means reassessing me as an educator. How am I actually instructing? And did I facilitate that learning well? We saw in last Padlet, maybe I didn't do it well. And that's where I think we as educators have to own that, right? And say, look, this was on me. We don't assume our kids can't do it. We need to assume that it wasn't done well where our kids could have learned it. And we just need to sometimes stay the course. But tier 1 instruction always really helps support your educators and understand that the learning occurs in tier 1 instruction, right? That is where we're going to get the most at grade level, standard aligned instruction is in that tier 1. I know Dave and I have this conversation all the time. We talk about tier 1 instruction perpetually because sometimes I feel like it's a forgotten aspect of the actual learning cycle. And tier 1 instruction is vital to actually what we do as a teacher planning, as a student learning, right? And as administrator, then guiding what that looks like on your school campus. So I just want to kind of to call that out, because as Mark kind of reviews these big highlights, we're going to kind of go into the different tiers of instruction. So thank you again for chatting with me.
Thanks, Janie. So we're just going to review to see, I think we really covered a lot of these bullets on the slide, what can we do when students are not reaching that mastery? And, we heard some really great conversations from some of our participants, this afternoon, but it's really looking at appropriate interventions that are designed by school level teams, tier 2 instructional interventions that go beyond the classroom, and then also looking at that tier 3 interventions for individual student needs. And so we're going to go to our next slide. All right, so let's look at this document that's from Benson that was published in 2001. And it really looks at the traditional classroom versus the standard-based classroom. This is a really nice table that breaks down and compares the two models. If we look on the left, you have the traditional classroom, and on the right, you have the standards-based classroom. So let's just go, let's go down a few. Teachers from a traditional classroom standpoint, teachers select topics from the curriculum. And then in the standards-based classroom, teachers identify and analyze concepts and skills to be learned based on the district's curriculum framework and pre-assessments of student performance. Another example of the traditional classroom is teachers use textbooks or published materials as a basis for planning instruction. When we're comparing that to that standards-based classroom model, teachers first identify what students must learn and how they will demonstrate that learning at a mastery level. It's really going deeper and diving into how your students will learn, and then planning instruction based on those learning targets. As Dave mentioned, it's really looking at that backward design when we're thinking about standards. The next example is from a traditional classroom point is teachers create and or administer tests at the end of lessons or units. And when we compare that to a standards-based classroom, is that teachers use a variety of assessments, looking at tools throughout a lesson to ensure that students are learning. Another example is lessons focus on teacher-directed activities. And when we're looking at a standards-based classroom, is that, you have the focus of lessons on what type of thinking and learning students will engage in. And I know you probably can read a lot of this on the slide, but I'm going to close out with this last one, is that I really like this one that Benson covered, is that teachers cover the curriculum within pre-planned units and timeframes. And from that traditional classroom standpoint, and when we compare that to the standards-based classroom, is that teachers continually monitor and adjust their instructional practices to ensure that students have learned before moving on to a new topic or unit. How many times have we been in meetings and we've heard that, educators have, rushed through some of this, the content within the curriculum, and it's just students have not felt where they had an opportunity to master some of that material. I think that's a conversation that has occurred in many classrooms across the country. So we're going to go on to our next slide. All right, so as we're getting ready to close out this afternoon, we're going to look at standard-based learning and practice we have this amazing video that we're going to have you observe for just 4 minutes and 50 seconds. And then we're going to have a discussion on what practices did you see within the video. So let me cue the video up.
So as you're doing that, so think about the 4 questions, right? Think about the things that when we're looking at a classroom, we're looking at learning, we're looking at instruction. What do we want our students to be able to know and be able to do? How do we know that the teaching is effective, right? How do we know that they're learning? And then what happens if they're not? So kind of look at those 4 big questions and have that in your head is, what are the tasks you're seeing? Both the teacher doing and the students doing? What assessments are happening? Think about that chart. What does it look like? And so kind of just jot some notes down, do it however you take notes best. We didn't want to tell you how to do it, but whatever works best for you. And then we're going to come back whole group and we're going to kind of discuss it. So with that, go Mark, take us away.
Thanks, Janie. And so this video is actually from Achieve the Core. And they actually have a plethora of great resources on their website. And so this is one of their instructional lesson plan videos that they have listed.
There are 2 questions. I put the poem that we looked at on Thursday over here on the side, just so you can see the actual text again as you're answering these questions. The first question relates to that text, so I do ask you and your groups to reread, go back to that as you're answering the question to help you. It says, last week we read the poem Old Age Sticks by E.E. Cummings. What are some ways that the old and young debase one another in this poem? Debase is one of our vocabulary words. So at your table, maybe the first thing you're going to have to do is have a conversation about, what does debase mean? And if we don't know, we might need to get our syllabus out and look at that. And then the second thing, I'm actually going to put a picture at your tables once you start working. There's going to be a painting called Para Siempre by Octavio Ocampo. And using details from this painting, I want you to look at it as a group, kind of critically analyze it, and answer the question, what do you think the artist is saying about the old? Okay, so what you want to do at your tables right now is you want to have a conversation about the first part. What does debase mean? Make sure you all know, and then work together to answer that question. And then I'm going to come around and put the picture on your desk so you can work on that. Do you have any questions about that? Okay, go ahead and get started with your conversations.
Debase, what do you think debase means?
That's good.
Lower instance.
To lower. Okay, here's your picture.
Yes.
The question's right there.
So,
here's your picture. And then debase one another.
Like the young don't listen to the old, and the old try to get them in line.
Did you guys look back at the poem and do a specific example, like line from it?
Yanks them down, so that was like yanking down their signs, that'd be debasing them.
Okay, how?
Bringing them down, like bringing down their signs. It's like disobeying them.
Okay. And are there any other places in here where you guys could see examples of that?
Yeah.
Maybe find another example too. That'd be great.
Okay, so also debase means, what do you say, Matt? Debase means to bring down.
So when do you say debasement?
It means to lower the status or like to lower their.
It's to make them feel like lower than they really are.
All right, Madison. What from the poem did you guys say was an example of debase?
We said young. Yeah, they're like disrespectful. They like yank down their signs that they put up.
Okay.
And they said that they like scold them for them to stop. They're trying to like control them, but they don't really listen to them.
All right, awesome. You're looking at that picture. I know you're going to be tempted to like say a lot of things like what you're seeing and things like that. Remember the guiding question, what it's asking you. It's saying using details from the painting. Okay, that's like taking, like when we take evidence from text, that's the same thing you're doing with this painting. if you say you think this is saying this about the old, you have to back that up with something that you see visually. I went around to the different tables and you did a good job, a lot of you, with the first question, actually taking a line from the E.E. Cummings poem to support what you're thinking. I want you to do the same thing with that painting there. So what are you guys thinking so far?
That their memories are inside like here.
Okay, so remember, then go back to the question where it says, what is the artist's message, and like, what do you think his point of like making this like painting would be?
We said like to show that the old doesn't feel as old as they actually are.
Oh, that's interesting. And then
these are the memories, and you still feel young.
Oh, cool. I like that. All right, very good. Nice work. You added something else to that. What did you say?
I put down like it kind of like shows themselves to who they were when they were younger, and that they always see, like, even though like when they grow old together and they see like different generations, they see themselves as who they are, not like how they grow up.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Make sure you have something from the picture visually to back that thinking up. You guys did a very nice job in your groups talking with one another, and when I came around and challenged some of you to add a little bit more to your thinking, you did a nice job with that. So we're going to do whole class share right now. What does debase mean, that vocabulary word exactly? So if you were debasing someone, what might you be doing?
Being rude.
You might be being rude, because what does debase mean?
Like disrespectful.
Right, Tony, you want to help out?
It's like a lower stature, like when you hurt someone that's kind of mean and bad.
Okay, so like you kind of make one feel like a lower status, right? You're kind of mean to them, because like she was saying like rude or bad. What are you gonna say, Abby?
I was gonna say like put them down. Like maybe you'll be like, oh, like you'll talk to people that they want to hang out with you.
So in that video, if you can just come off mute and just share what are some examples that you saw when it comes to some strategies that this educator used when working with her students in this work session. Feel free to come off mute, or you can type it into the chat. I'll actually help us get started. You know, one thing that I observed is that, you know, the educator really allowed students to engage in, you know, productive conversation. You know, they were allowed to make mistakes. And then she also was going around the room, conferencing formally and informally with students. Any other items that we saw in the video that was really productive in this work session when working with the students?
Okay, for a second.
I love her answer already. Right? I love it. Exactly.
Okay, it's not your turn to talk.
I love it.
So I would say, well, one thing that really stuck out to me right away was using the vocabulary word in context. Like the fact that she was saying, okay, debase is one of our vocabulary words, but then they were using that as part of their answer. That was like the first thing that struck me right away. But really, like, I liked how she was going around first, checking with groups, kind of like clarifying some of the misunderstandings that some of them had, but not, of course, coming out right away and just saying, oh, you're wrong, just saying, okay, well, and like kind of guiding them towards, you know, the correct answers without saying, no, that's wrong, or this is the answer.
Right. Thanks, Devin, for sharing that. That's a really good observation that she had in there. Robert, did you have anything that you saw?
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing, right? That idea of you have a sage on the stage or the guide on the side, and she was being the guide throughout the process. Yeah, I mean, she did the, you know, she was on the stage part and she did that part of it. But then she made sure that the students struggled with it, and, you know, they reached a point of struggle where she had to step in, and, you know, you step in and you help out and push them along a little bit.
Do you think that she assessed in immediate ways to be able to identify who was learning and who was not? Did you see examples of that?
Yeah, but I'm not going to pull them off the top of my head right now. I did not take notes.
Bob, I mean, come on now.
Thanks, Robert. Yes. And also Tammy shared that it's, you know, there was a really great respectful learning environment that was observed within that work session. So Nicole also shared it's a safe and risk-free space for students to participate and engage with each other. So really great examples of how, when we're thinking about standard-based learning, how we can, students are engaging with each other, and also you're having, that high level of lesson planning that's going throughout the whole entire content. So, all right, so that brings us back to our next slide, and Janie's going to bring it up.
Mark, just real quick on the last part. One of the things that was interesting, if you heard her feedback to the whole group, she wasn't just, I liked how you did it. She gave, I liked how you did that, gave the example, because I'm sort of like in the same boat as Bob was, is what were the exact words? But I mean, she gave you an exact, so that in the, now I'd like you to try that same idea with number 2. You have a thought, okay, I'm driving down the right path if I'm on that, or if not, this is where I need to go. So.
Exactly right. Just reaffirming, right, that feedback is a version of assessment, and that we need to make sure that our educators are doing that in a very consistent, constant way, so that our kids are never guessing, like, how am I doing? What's happening? Right. I can give a story. My nephew is in a middle school, and he just didn't know a science grade until 2 days before the quarter ended. He never received a grade, never received feedback for 9 weeks, had zero idea what was happening. So you just don't know what you're doing. So you just assume, and when you're in middle school, well, you don't care. So if you're not being told anything's wrong, why would you ask, right? Like, you just move on. But like, all kids want to know, right? They're people pleasers. They want to do well. But it is up to us and our job to ensure that we do offer that feedback. So that's just always something to consider, that, and our teachers sometimes shy away from that, but feedback is important. And yes, it's timely. It is a timely aspect. And that's something where we have to help figure out is how we actually incorporate that feedback in that daily learning, and how is that part of that cycle. So kind of as we think about all that, again, as you see on the slide, we always are looking for suggestions. So please continue and share this with your staff. If you guys are looking for anything or anything specific, go ahead and please share it. You can also find it on our website, and you can access this form at any time, and you can share it with your staff or your other colleagues, and anything that, especially if we start getting multiple requests, we can do this. We can do it as a webinar. Something in this fashion. We also can, if requested, can help and come to your school or your district for some things. And so we have requests that we actually are going to Douglas Mineral, where we actually help support teachers on the ground. So don't be afraid to ask. We're happy to assist where we can. But your voice is important to us, and we do like to make sure that we do hear you. So whatever you need, let us know, reach out. And then lastly, any contact. So anything that you need from this, please go ahead and reach out. I did just give you Dave's email, so it wasn't all of ours. You do have a lot of ours, but if there is something specific, Dave can always help get to us. The only last thing I'm just going to say is that we do have our Teaching and Learning Conference, which is in 1 month from today. We are almost sold out. Essentially, we have sold 700 tickets out of 800. So we're very excited about it. If you have teachers who want to go, or you yourself want to attend, it is also for college credit. It's either 7.5 professional reading hours or 15 hours for 1 credit. If you do want to go, I would definitely say sign up sooner than later. But we have over 126 sessions that will be available in all content areas. It'll be very exciting. We have 2 very dynamic keynote speakers. Lots of different national presentations from national organizations, lots of awesome raffle prizes that we're going to be able to do. It's going to be a really great day of learning for our educators that will really go across all levels, all teachers, counselors, administrators, and all content areas, you name it. So if you want to learn more about something in mathematics, there's going to be sessions for K-5 as well as secondary. If you want to know more about, I don't know, so many things I can't even think of right now.
But health and PE, we
have health and PE, world language,
fine arts.
Yes, lots and lots of stuff. So highly encourage you to come. If you want more information, let me know. A lot of you may have received my emails about it. So